I'm Jane Applegath. This is the Epic Vision Zone, where bold ideas meet extraordinary leaders. What if the most painful moments in your life could become the doorway to your greatest wisdom? And what happens when your entire world collapses in a single week? At age 40, Larry Freeborg experienced losses most people can barely imagine. Just after Christmas in 1979, his wife passed away from leukemia, and only days later, he lost his job of 18 years. Suddenly, Larry was a widow, father of four, with no income, no roadmap, and no obvious way forward. What followed was a long and profound journey, one that would unfold over decades. His journey became one of learning how to grieve, how to lead with love, and how to rediscover hope when everything seemed lost. And the truth he revealed: no matter what life takes away, you are always at choice. The author of Always at Choice and founder of Stepping Through the Gate, Larry's Wise Elder coaching service helps people move through loss towards healing, renewal, and a fully engaged life. For over 30 years, he has guided people through life's most difficult transitions, helping them to rediscover clarity, possibility, and purpose. Larry's previously spent over 2 decades in corporate leadership roles at 3M and Metachronic, working in marketing, innovation, and life-saving medical technologies, such as pacemakers and implantable defibrillators. He is a graduate of the University of Minnesota and a former top collegiate swimmer. Today, his greatest mission is to remind people that even in life's darkest moments, the power to choose how we move forward is always ours. Welcome, Larry. Thank you for joining us here today.
Thank you. It's nice to be here and experience your husband's technology. It's fascinating.
Well, we're both fortunate in that regard. So I'm just your story, Larry, is so inspiring. And so let's delve in and let's garner the inspiration and the insight that you have a lifetime worth. Larry, defining the moment when you lost your wife and your career within the same week, and you had four young children to care for, that is something that is unimaginable for most people to fathom. When did you realize that you had a choice in how you would move forward? And what did that moment teach you about the human spirit?
Well, it taught me how to live life, really. At 40 years old, I was busy focused on career and achievement of certain levels of responsibility in the company. It was I was a highly motivated, inspired young man and having the opportunity to do things that I was good at. But I really didn't know very much about parenting at that time. And what happened is all of a sudden I got splashed in the face with cold water, and somebody said, "Hey, you've got four kids that you need to take care of here." I didn't get the idea right away. I struggled, still trying to be the same kind of guy that I was before. I was really active in my community. I was leading certain groups, but all of a sudden I stopped keeping my promise. Not on purpose. It was just that I had too much work to do and I couldn't keep up with everything that I was committed to do, along with raising my four kids. Eventually, I came to the office one day. I sat down at my desk and I started to cry. And I mean, I was just bawling. And finally, I realized I've got to do something different than what I'm doing. So I called my folks and I told my dad what was going on. And he said, "Well, is there anybody at the company that you could talk to?" And I said, "Yeah, there is. There was an employment service guy there, but I had connections with a psychiatrist." So I called the psychiatrist and asked if he'd see me, and he talked to me for just a few minutes. And after he listened to my story, he said, "Would you be willing to put yourself on the psych ward?" And I said, "You bet. I'm ready to go." Now, that maybe is a little unusual back in those days that I would so willingly accept going into the psych ward, but I was already learning how to use outside consultants in my business work. In other words, there was a time in my life where I thought I had to do everything. In this particular case, I had already learned that I could use outside consultants to help me get a job done. And I thought, if I can use outside consultants in my business life, why can't I use outside consultants in my personal life? I didn't see any stigma to it, where at that time in my age group, people had a lot of stigma to the fact that you'd go into the psych ward. But it was in the psych ward where I got the big lesson. I was, they left me there for a couple of days, and then somebody, an occupational therapist, came by and said, "How are things, Larry?" "Oh, great. I'm in a psych ward, but things are going great. I'm a positive guy." So she went through the list of all the things that we had to do, and then she asked me, "Well, how's cooking?" I said, "Oh man, cooking. I cooked the first three meals. We were married." Then I said, "You cook, and I'll go out and make the money." So it's I didn't know how to cook again at that particular time. I could do burgers, pancakes, eggs, but I just couldn't cook regular meals. So I said, "You could learn how to cook here." And I said, "You're kidding." "No, but you have to do it right." Well, what a setup. Now I know it's a setup. At that time, I didn't know it was a setup. But you have to get your cookbook, and you have to order all the ingredients in. We'll provide the ingredients, and then we'll put you in your room, and you can start cooking. So I chose that I would cook a chicken, bake a chicken. Well, any woman who knows about cooking knows that baking a chicken is a pretty easy task. But I'm going to do it right, so I'm making my own dressing, and I'm chopping the liver, and I'm chopping the onions, and I'm chopping the celery, and I'm boiling this broth because I'm going to make my own stuffing. Today I'd use stovetop in a minute, but at that particular time, I'm going to do the stuffing also. And I have this French knife in my hand, and I'm busy chopping everything, and I'm getting angrier and angrier and angrier. And I said, I've got to talk to somebody because I was concerned about being angry with this big knife in my hand. And today we know about PTSD. So it makes sense that I would maybe be angry at the situation that I was in. So they sent me to my room without the knife, of course. And this cheery nurse comes in and said, "Well, hi, Larry. I understand you had a little breakdown." I said, "Yes, and I've just spent 2 hours cooking on this GD chicken, and that's how I'm going to have to live the rest of my life." She said, "Well," she said, "Well, how are you going to choose to take care of your kids?" I said, "It's not a choice. I have to take care of my kids." My mom had been sick when I was 10 years old, and my dad took care of myself and my sister and my brother, and I have to take care of my kids. "Well, I'm just suggesting that you're a choice about how you take care of your kids. You can take care of your kids. You could put your kids out to your family members. You can put them out to schools. You could, all sorts of opportunities. You could choose to take care of your kids that way." I said, "It's not a choice. Like I said, my dad took care of me. I'm going to take care of my kids." She says, "Well, we're just trying to give you some options that you're a choice." Well, I got so irritated with her. I said, "All right, I choose to take care of my kids." She says, "Good. Well, now that you've chosen how you're going to take care of your kids, now we can decide how you're going to feed your kids." And that became my big lesson, is to realize it wasn't have to, need to, want to, got to. I got to choose to take care of my kids, but I chose to take care of my kids. That
Mhm.
was about maybe 4 weeks into my beginning of my recovery. But it made such a big difference to look at my life like I was a choice. I had never thought that I was a choice about my stuff. And then I realized that the next lesson right after that is that I'm accountable and responsible for what I create in my life. In other words, I wasn't accountable for her leukemia. I'm not accountable for tsunamis. I'm not accountable for snowstorms. I'm not accountable for breakdowns. I am accountable for how I think about them. Those two
Mhm.
lessons were the big starting way of my living life differently than I was living before.
Mm. Larry, so profound. That last statement that you said, you are accountable for how you think about them and that you have a choice. The choice is the perspective. It's looking at it from a different perspective, which changes everything. And then that once again, your choice of, how you not only look at them, but what you think how they are going to become, like your thoughts. Is this going to be
Right.
difficult? It's going to be something I can't handle, or is it going to be something that I know we can get through this? So absolutely wonderful. Thank you. What an incredible way to have that light bulb go on, because a lot of people may have gone through the same thing, but the light bulb, the awareness went on for you. And that's
Yes.
incredible. Absolutely
And
incredible. Go ahead.
thank you. Oh, I just wanted to share one other lesson that came to me a little later on as I started to take these coaching courses. And one of my teachers used to say, be an observer of the observer you are. And I couldn't figure out, what is he trying to tell me? Be an observer of the observer I am. And the more that I thought about it, and now that I think about it, I realize that how I look at the problem could be the problem. In other words, that's really an amazing lesson, is that, hey, how I'm looking at the problem is actually the problem. And if I look at the problem differently, I might solve it differently and actually get it solved. But if I look at the problem the same way that I've always looked at the problem, I'll be stuck. Well, it turns out that that's a basis for a lot of the coaching that I do, is that people are stuck in their belief systems. And the biggest thing that they have to learn how to do is shift their belief systems. And if they shift their belief systems, they can go on and have a good life. But if they stay stuck in a certain belief system about how it should be, how it's supposed to show up, there's no guarantee that life is going to show up the way that you learned it when you grew up. In fact, it's probably going to be a lot different than how you learned it was supposed to be. But I found that one lesson also to be helpful.
Mm.
More often than not, I find out that I could have looked at my problem differently.
That is that is a takeaway. How you look at the problem could be the problem. That's something everybody needs to keep in their back pocket when they're stuck, because it will be the reminder that say, okay, yes, that's maybe what's happening, is how I'm looking at the problem is the problem. So let's take a breath and take a look at it in a different way. That's
Yeah,
fabulous. Thank you for sharing that. I'm so glad you shared that. Well, I am so excited that you are here, Larry. You are 87 years young. And I am
thank you.
curious, as most people, you're very welcome. And I'm curious, as many people would be, why are you still working? And I don't know that I would call it working out with this.
Um, it's a choice. I looked at the word at 65. Everybody is talking about, oh man, I want to retire at 65. And I kept saying, well, why do you want to retire? I said, I'm enjoying doing what I'm doing. But I find a lot of people that retire didn't find how to enjoy work. What I found was a lesson at 27 about creatively capitalize on my natural gifts and talents wherever they would take me. that became my mantra about how I looked at my life. So I kept looking for things that I enjoyed, that I had fun at. And then the third thing that I added, they were contributions. They were acts of service, and that I got an awful lot of fulfillment out of doing acts of service and watching other people grow and achieve their gifts and talents. So that also became a big lesson that it was easier to have fun and enjoy my work than to lament about how bad it is and I want to retire. Because I looked at a lot of the people that were retiring, and they were just sitting on the wall or just fishing or golfing. Some people can have a lot of fun doing that, but that wasn't where I was at. So I try not to judge others for what they do, but I know what I chose for me was to be of service. And at that particular time, your age doesn't seem to make any difference. Your health does, which is what we started our conversation with, because you have to be healthy in order to be of service. But mentally healthy and physically healthy, I would have to say. But mostly it's because I choose to be of service and I get a lot of satisfaction and fulfillment out of helping other people.
Mm. Yes, when we give, we receive, and it's
Yeah,
a it fills you up. It fills your cup. It absolutely does. I understand completely because much like you, I used to be in the financial industry, which was another era of my life,
right.
but that was not the service I was here to fulfill. It did not resonate with my heart. But I understand what you're talking about because this is what gives me fulfillment is sharing people's stories with the world. And so I agree with you. I don't think that retirement should be in our vocabulary. We are past that point. And in fact, at 65, they call it the new 40. I mean, you know,
Yeah.
people are living longer. And it's almost as if when you stop, that's when everything stops. And it's not that you have to work hard, it's just find something you enjoy.
Well, retirement is a man made concept. It didn't
Mm.
exist 2,000 years ago. It didn't even exist 200 years ago. It's not even 200 years old. It's 100 years old, about a little less than that. But the fact that it was originally designed in Germany to take care of some generals, and they put the age group at 65 because they wanted to not pay off too early in the game. But it's just funny how that's become the focus of people's lives, and they think that that's where it starts. And I'm saying, no, it's it's a bad retires a bad word. If you look it up in the dictionary, you don't want to retire, really.
I'm with you, Larry. I agree 100%. No such thing. Well, let's move on then to your book because I am just in awe that you have a book out. So tell us about your book, Always at Choice, and why you felt it was meant to be part of your legacy, and give us the meaning behind the ship on the cover.
Thank you. I love my ship. That ship is a metal rubbing, a picture of the actual metal rubbing that I did when I was in the psych ward. And how I tried to frame the ship was that there's a dark side and it's moving into the light side. And that's how I looked at my life. I said, right now I'm in the dark side, but with a bunch of help, sailors and people helping me sail this big ship, I'm moving into the bright side. And that's how I look at my life is I couldn't do all the stuff that I do alone. I learned how to ask for help along the way. And while the painting or the rubbing is my rubbing, somebody else designed it. I leveraged off of their design, but it became so emblematic for what I was doing with my life that it seemed to fit. Not a self-help book because you normally wouldn't put that on a self-help book. A big ship that's but it's a nice feeling about that's my life is that I'm a big galleon out there in the sea, sailing well. Sailors are helping out. It just feels good. In fact, I thought maybe for my next podcast, I ought to just bring my rubbing up. So it's just a little thing about this size, but it's pretty for me.
Yeah. Yeah, and the book itself, it's lessons in how we move through life. Just give us a little insight into the content. Content.
Well, you know that that becomes a surprise for me. It took me 20 years thinking about the book. Just it was not an easy task. Writing is not something that I thought that I was good at. And I kept avoiding taking on this challenge. But after 20 years, I looked at my wife and I said, well, you can either write the book or not write the book. But what are you going to choose to do? Let's make a choice here. So I researched what was the way to write a book if I didn't know how to write a book. And for me, the best way was to do like hybrid publishing, which meant that I would find somebody that would help me with the writing. I would find somebody that would help me with the publishing, also help me with the marketing. But what was interesting is I found out almost instantly didn't, I was right about not being able to write, in my opinion. So I hired a writing coach. That writing coach was really helpful, put me right on the task. But the real benefit of using this publishing company, which has changed names, but uh, was the editor that they placed me with. Now, in order to use an editor, you have to take input. You have to be willing to listen to feedback. But she was outstanding. She just took that book and just made it really pop. And
Mm.
we just talked about the philosophy of what you're trying to do with the book. And I was really trying to put something out that would be helpful for people. That when they would get certain struggles, there would be some lessons that I had learned by and experienced, not just because it was an intellectual thought, but because I had experience. That was the criteria that I used for the lessons that I put in the book, that I had actually done this, found out that it worked. If it didn't work, it didn't go in the book.
Mm. Perfect. Oh, I'm so glad that you mentioned that you can do the hybrid writing, because there are a lot of individuals that do have in their soul to write a book, but like you, they just don't know where to start. And the other thing is that I feel there's stories in the book. Like you said, there's lessons, but the lessons come from your experience, and we all learn through
Right.
stories, because those are the greatest way of communication. So it sounds wonderful, and I love the ship. I think it's intriguing, and yeah, it really it's sailing through life. I mean, that's basically what, for me, that's what it symbolizes. Well, thank you for that information. And now moving on, what's the greatest challenge, Larry, that you dealt with in grieving?
Um, the lesson that I said about changing my mind.
Mm.
Um, Actually, I changed my mind with regard to what was my number one focus, which was taking care of my kids. But it also came up when I was choosing my next mate. It it's I think it's so easy to meet someone, but it's not. It wasn't for me anyway. And that became a big learning experience because I had developed a belief system because of my situation with my mother having Guillain-Barré, never know if she's going to come back or not. My high school sweetheart who told me she was going to be gone to Washington, D.C. for 6 months. I never saw her again. I joined the Air Force and was in the Air Force for 8 years because my choice to be around for her. And then just the whole idea of having Shirley leave, is I had the belief system that I could trust the women that I loved to leave me. And that was not a very good thing in terms of being in a relationship because I put out that I want you, come here to me. And then as you got close, I'd push you away. So that
Mm.
didn't work very well. And that was maybe the toughest decision that I made is to let go of the fact that, hey, that's a misspoken belief system. The women that I love don't leave me. The women that I love are with me every day. Shirley's with me every day. My new wife, who just passed away a year ago, uh, left me. They haven't left. They've only left me physically. They haven't left me emotionally.
Right.
So
Yes.
that's probably the biggest decision. But that's also the one that you could see a big difference in me by shifting my belief system. I was able to do something that I couldn't have done otherwise. So we had 33 years of happiness together. We really had a fun time, Dodie and I had a fun time with Shirley too. Now I'm looking at, okay, what's next in my life, Larry? And that's the decision about really grieving is that sometime you have to just make a decision and acknowledge, accept that Dodie's not coming back, Shirley's not coming back. So once you accept that they're not coming back, you're a choice about choosing what you want to do with your life. And the book happened to get done about that same year in September. It published, and the book was the opportunity for me to go out and share my story. So that's what I'm doing.
Mm. Wonderful. Oh my gosh. Well, this is the perfect segue, actually, Larry, to our next question, which is, as you've been speaking about, beliefs are often hardwired based on our life's programming and our experience. As you mentioned with the women in your life, that they were bound
Right.
to leave you. So changing those beliefs can be challenging. So, as a coach, how do you work with clients that are stuck in a belief system that's not working for them? Just give us a little insight into how you work people through that.
You have the results that you want to create. So that's the goal.
Mhm.
What I realized in all these coaching modalities that I learned, the thing that stopped most of the companies that I was working with is that they would be clear about what they wanted to create, but there was somebody or some place where they had a belief system that wouldn't allow them to take the action. So you ask, what's the source of your belief? Is it your parents? Is it your religion? Is it your friends? Is it school? What's the source of beliefs? And by the way, are those beliefs helping you right now or hindering you right now? If they're helping, terrific. Let's see what we can do to take advantage of them. If they're hindering you, what's an alternative choice that you could have that could maybe work better? Byron Katie is a good model for how to do that. Is it true? Is it absolutely true? Good questions,
Mhm.
but it helps people make a shift. Until you get them to make the shift that there's a belief system that works better than the one that they have, it's not easy to coach them. And that was a big lesson for me as I thought at the beginning when I learned coaching, well, I'd probably get maybe 80% or 85% of all the people that I coach. I don't hit that number. It's not that high. I'd love to think that I was a super coach, but I'm not a super coach. But I mean, a pretty good coach, quite frankly. But I really get a lot of satisfaction out of helping people, so I'm pretty patient. I used to judge people a little more harshly than I judge them today. I'm a little more accepting, practice a lot more empathy about what was their background. What did they learn when they were 5 years old? And there's a really good book out called, or process called positive intelligence, which really helps you help people get in touch with what are the barriers, he calls them saboteurs, that we all
Mm-hmm.
have by the time we're 5 years old. But
Right.
seeing what are the saboteurs that are dogging me, mine is always that I'm not good enough. So I have to really
Mm.
watch out for that one because it comes up so fast. I'm not adequate. I can't do that. Now I can just say, oh, there's the judge again. He's back again, holding me back. And I can just let him go and move on.
Yeah, yeah. That awareness is the key, like you said, and
Yeah.
just naming it and saying, okay, yeah, you can just go back in your little cave and stay there. But yeah, absolutely. I mean, yeah, it's a program that we get stuck in, and certainly it's really uncovering the layers that have just been piled on us over our life.
Right.
And those layers, you know, often are not the good ones. They're the bad ones that you latch onto. And that is the work. It's reclaiming ourselves, who we are
Right.
meant to be. So actually, speaking of reclaiming, how does someone begin to reclaim their power, to choose when life feels like it has taken everything from them? Where does that start? Do we start with their beliefs, or do we start somewhere else?
See the question again?
So say that life has taken everything from you. So how does someone begin to
Right.
reclaim their power when they feel like life has just taken everything from them?
I can only tell you what I do. And it's interesting because you use the words yourself. The two stories are one is the serenity prayer. I really use the
Mm,
serenity prayer a lot in my mind. God grant me the serenity to accept the things that I cannot change. I remember my experiences, I did it in my shower and I was struggling with a problem. I did it 40 times, saying that same prayer over and over again. And finally, it's like the light bulb went on. Hey, Larry, it's just about changing your mind, about uh, accepting what you cannot change. Then the next part is seeing what the gift and the opportunity is, because there's always a gift and an opportunity coming. You can convert your problem into an opportunity. It doesn't happen what instantly. It's not like you can snap your fingers and that happens. But if you hold the space that it's going to happen, that there's a gift and an opportunity in everything that comes up, you'll generally end up on the positive side of life. The other
right.
part that you mentioned earlier when we first started talking was about how important your body was. And one of the coaching courses that I went to talked about three ways of intervening in people. One was in language, one was in emotions, and the other one was in the body. Well, they did a really good job of teaching language and they did a really good job of teaching emotions. But didn't feel this particular coaching modality did a good job of teaching the body. And I ended up taking a somatics course, a somatics coaching
Mm,
course. And that made a huge difference of knowing that a lot of those emotions were living in my body and I had to release them from my body to continue to move on. So I hope my lessons help some other people consider those options anyway. Uh, there's even more options than what I tried, but these are the ones that worked for me.
right. Yes. I mean, that is the key, the exploration. I loved your curiosity because like you say, today there are so many different options, but we've also uncovering so much with neuroscience and sound healing and breath, the power of breath. There is,
Right,
this is the advent of technology today is giving us insight into the power that we actually have within ourselves to heal ourselves in
right,
every which way, which in the old days was considered woo woo, or you're just really off your rocker. It's like
right,
you want to. or you'd have people banging drums and they just think, well, that's just a hippie, who's lost their mind or on drugs, so to speak. But yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely. I love the fact that you're willing to try different things. And that's one of the key elements of creativity is curiosity. And it's curiosity for your own self, for your own well-being as well. It's not just about
right,
life, or like, let's take your book for example. You knew you wanted to write a book. It was in you to write a book. And so that
right,
curiosity led you to, okay, well, let's find out how I can accomplish this without having to, just sit in front of a computer or pen and paper and just write. And you found the answer.
right.
So wonderful. Well, that being said, and you may have answered this question, what are some daily life lessons that you've learned on your journey, especially the ones that are dealing with fear and its impact on our life?
Actually, I'd step back one step before I dealt with fear. And I feel that I'm accountable and responsible for my mood that I take action
Mm,
with. So I really think it's important to manage my mood. Now, always knew for the longest time that being positive was more helpful than being negative, like, say, from psychocybernetics. But I didn't know how to manage the positive thoughts until I came across a guy by the name of Sean Achor who studied happiness. What do people do to be happy?
mm,
And so the way that I manage my happiness, a lot of people do it with gratitudes. I do it with blessings. And you say, well, what are
mm,
blessings as compared to what are they compared to gratitudes? Well, blessings are things that come to me that I don't have any control over. For example, if I'm in the springtime, there's flowers, all sorts of birds, cardinals, colors, blue jays, trees, the various kinds of trees. I happen to get stuck in the equine world, and I love being around horses and the
mm,
way that horses can bring people out and have these great emotional experiences and help solve PTSD. There's a lot of things that I'm not in control over that I just am grateful. I love squirrels, so where I live, I have black squirrels, white squirrels, and gray squirrels. I count squirrels every day. They just access to life for me, and
mm,
they're also
mm,
access to reality because I know these animals die, these plants die,
mhm,
these trees die, I die. It's just a fact. I can't do anything about it. I can just enjoy living and making a contribution with where I'm at. Now, you
mm,
said deal with fear. It was your question. How do I deal with fear? Well, there are two major lessons that make a difference in how I deal with fear. The first one, actually, there were more than two, but the first one was a sales rep was selling me, and I was 27 years old, and he said, do the thing you fear the most, and the death of fear is certain. And that's an idea, but it didn't really work very well for me. However, the other idea about if I did a ropes course or I did rock climbing or
mm,
um, which is where I put myself in a place where there's fear. I was actually afraid. But if you look at fear, fear is false expectations appearing real. And this
mm,
whole thing about being an observer of the observer you are, if you can say, well, what am I doing here that really makes sense? And the thing that really crystallized that for me was whitewater rafting. I had an experience in whitewater rafting where we had to raft this huge wave in Costa Rica. And the guide had said, if you don't hit this wave with enough force, it, it will turn you upside down and pop you off like little toothpicks. Well, guess what? My draft didn't hit it with enough force. We came popping out like little toothpicks. And I ended up coming out underneath the rafts, and I'm trying to save my sandals. There's air bubbles all around me. And I'm thinking, it might be better if I go get some air instead of trying to save my sandals. So, so I
Oh,
did. The very next day, and a kayaker rescues you. And so the very next day, I was tossed out of the first rapid. So all of a sudden, I'm starting to get a little anxious because this was a 9-day
mhm.
whitewater rafting trip, and I was
Oh
taking my
my.
son on it, and I was so concerned for my son and myself. And he and I have talked about it. He says, "Yeah, Dad, I was really wondering what we were doing on that trip." Well, so that night, again, asking for help, I figured that the river guides that were guiding us had to have some experience with customers that had fear. And so I asked one of the guys, I said, "Will you have people that take your rafts and they have fear? What do you teach them or what do you suggest to them?" He said, "What I noticed is that people that are whitewater rafting, they have this experience of getting flipped out of one raft. And so now they hear stories about what's happening down the rest of the river. And they add
Mm,
on the next rapid and the next rapid and the next rapid. And pretty soon, instead of just taking the small little rapids, they're trying to get over this huge rapid. And so I suggest you take one rapid at a time. Not
mhm,
bad recommendation for handling fear. The other one that I talked to said, "Well, my experience is that there are actually more accidents that happen on the shoreline than in the boat." He said,
hmm,
playing badminton, catch, volleyball. Said, but if you follow the rules of, you know,
right.
floating down feet first and stuff like that, it's generally pretty safe. And then the third river guide really made the big difference for me. He said, what you ought to try is people are down here in Costa Rica doing whitewater rafting in the wintertime because the water is warmer. He said,
Mm,
so if it's got a flat area in the river, jump into the water and experience the water. It's fun. And I thought, Freeborg, this is here you are. You've been a record-breaking swimmer for the University of Minnesota, and you're afraid of the water. This doesn't make any sense. So
oh my
again,
gosh.
it's shifting your belief system about what it is. And I went through it. Sure, I didn't really take on class 4 and class 5 rapids, rigorously. I had done my thrill now, but I learned how to manage that fear with experience.
Wow, those are great stories. I love it. Oh my gosh. And you're right. You're an award-winning swimmer. And it's like, what are you thinking? You forgot all about it. That was the fear. The fear made
Yeah.
your entire history of your ability to swim go out the window. Wow. Yeah, that's amazing.
And,
But thank you. That
yeah.
go ahead.
No, that's that story.
Okay.
So anyway, the way that avoidance is a good experience also where fear comes up, right? And what Shirzad talks about in positive intelligence is taking this big thing that is causing you to avoid, you're not getting it done. He said, what you do is you look at what you're avoiding and you break it down into little steps, just little steps. Is there one little step that you could take that you feel comfortable that you could actually get done and take that little step? He said, but be sure to celebrate the achievement. Said, if you don't
Mm,
celebrate the achievement, you have nothing to build on, but celebrate the fact that you made just a little progress there. And what you'll find is sometimes you've got enough momentum to take on the next step of the thing that you avoid, and the next step of what you avoid. And that's the way that I tackle most of the things that I'm afraid of. Is break it down into little
Mhm.
pieces and one step, one rapid at a time is how I talk about it.
I love it. That's absolutely perfect. And celebrate the wins. Yeah, that's what
Right.
gives you the encouragement to continue on. Well, thank you so much for those stories. Well, you have something here that I love because I'm very much attuned to language. You said, "How is learning the power of language been useful in creating results?"
That was a big breakthrough for me in the journey. Uh, I took the courses from about 8 times from people that had studied with this guy and to really get in touch with what was language. His name is Fernando Flores. And what was what I learned about language when I went to school was nouns, verbs, adverbs, pronouns, not very useful when you think about that you're creating direction with language. And what he had discovered is that language was a form of taking action or getting people to take action, like the declaration of me choosing what I wanted to do. And what would happen is, in order to make a choice about what I wanted to do, I'd make an assessment of what was missing. And what was
Mhm.
missing would be my observations or my interpretations of what was missing. Like I hadn't written a book, I can make a choice to write a book, make a declaration, and go for it. And you have to learn how to separate assessments, interpretations, and opinions from facts. Well, I didn't have any language that I could separate facts from opinions and interpretations. And a lot of people think that just because a lot of people think the same way, that's a fact. No, maybe it's a fact that they think the same way, but the temperature is 72 degrees out. That's measurable. I can measure the 72 degrees, but I can't necessarily measure the opinion. I can say, well, there's lots of opinions like that, but they're just opinions and interpretations. But we live in a world that lives with people making interpretations and opinions, and you rather work on the facts. So then you have to learn what I think is an important part is how to make a request in a way that secures a promise. That a lot of times we don't live in a good promise keeping world. And a promise keeping world has certain things that have to be into the request in order for you to have a secured a promise. So you have to people have to make a commitment by what date they're going to get together. Just like we did to coordinate having this conversation, is that what was really important is we set a time and I showed up at the time that you asked me to show up at. So I kept my promise. It's a lot easier to work with people that keep their promise as compared to ones that don't. Because broken
Mhm.
promises is the big area where lack of trust comes. I asked
Mhm.
people, how do you feel when somebody that has promised something to you doesn't show up? Well, people
Mhm.
get upset, they get angry, they get
Yeah.
frustrated. If I look at the world today, there's lots of things that I think the promise has been broken. The promise of America has been broken, and I'd like to get it back and figure out how to do that.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Well, here's something that I think a lot of us could use today: staying grounded. Share with our audience just one simple daily practice that helps you stay centered and grounded, even when life feels unpredictable, which it does a lot these days.
Well, I still go back to the body about
Mm,
knowing where center is in my body and find center. And that's the one thing that I'm using right now. I don't know other things of how to stay centered through it, but uh, the body and I think meditation, thoughts, just being quiet in my thinking.
mm,
Again, yeah, that's the place that I go.
right. Yeah. giving ourselves time to create some space, so that I say the static, we just quiet the static. So yes,
Yeah,
absolutely. There's a lot to be said. There's a beautiful quote that I love. It says, "To the mind that is still, the universe surrenders," and it's
that's
very
very nice.
profound. Yeah,
Yeah,
very. Yeah. So I always keep that in
I think
mind.
I think you walk in your life pretty centered. My sense of you, anyway, as we're talking,
Oh,
and the learning that you've done along the way too is that you're following a path that is pretty grounded and pretty centered. You're recognizing the value of your body, and you use your body to help stay centered.
thank you. Yeah, it's definitely a. I always say my quote is, "Life is a practice." It's always a practice. We
It
we
is
practice, it's and we continue to practice, because we all have our good days, we all have our bad moments. I mean, even the likes of a lot of the individuals you've mentioned, we all think that they walk on water, but Joe Dispenza is one of my favorites, and he says, "I have bad days," he said, "but I just sit my butt down and get back to business." Which
right.
in his case is meditation. But yeah, it's a practice. You just have to keep coming back. I love it. Larry, if there was one message you could share with the world, what would it be?
To all these podcasters that are listening, I'm thinking right now. The one message I leave with the world. I th- you're always a choice. I think is still my best lesson.
Mm,
Is
yeah.
that first off, that you are a choice, that you have the freedom to make the choices, but nothing happens until you truly choose. You could operate like a victim all your life, or you could be in control of your life. My experience is life is a lot more enjoyable when I make the choice of what I'm going to do with it. And I've only got one. Uh, Writing this book was pretty interesting because I got in touch with how short life was. We're only here for a brief moment, so that in grieving, I could choose to grieve for a long time. And there are some people that you're trying to help and they're stuck in grief. How do you get
Mhm.
them out of grief? Is to realize that there's two lives going on right now. One is your life of grieving, the other one is your life of choosing what are you going to do with your life now. And
Yeah.
when I did that and I looked at Shirley's life, she died at 39. That's a young age. Here I am, 87. There's a big difference between what I experienced and what she experienced in her life. But then you look at all the people that are young people that are getting killed in these bombing runs and stuff like that. They never had a chance to live long lives either. But in their particular case, I think that's where there's some tough work that will need to be done by those young people that are experiencing society as we live in it today. I hope there's some good mental therapists that are available to help those folks out.
Yes, absolutely. Because you're right, and it's interesting, because it's only as we age that we understand that life is, it's a gift, but also there's another quote that I have here. It says, "Death whispered, 'Live, for I am coming.'" And that sounds,
Okay.
some people say that's morbid, but I see it as, it's a wake up call.
Yeah.
It's a wake up call. It's like, start living, because we can't escape that last part. It's all going to happen to
No.
everybody. But
Right.
so you're right. It is a choice. It's absolutely a choice. So thank you for all of these insights, Larry. And tell our audience then how we can best connect with you.
Well, the best way of connecting with me would be on my book website is always a choice. And the podcasts are also there, so you can listen to some of the other things that I've shared in other podcasts, along with this one. But you can also buy the book from that particular website. My coaching website is Stepping Through the Gate, which is an
Mm,
interesting choice again of how did I choose that name for a business. But I was doing an equine workshop, and somebody who had just had a major breakthrough said, "Thank you very much. You've just allowed me to step through the gate because I've had all these barriers that have held me back, and now I can step through the gate and have what I want." And
mm,
that was so impressive for me, is that that is what we're all doing, is stepping through the gate of the stuck places that are in our life, not just about grieving or not just about loss, but anytime we get stuck and we have something that we'd like to achieve, we have to step through the gate of what's blocking us from getting there.
mm. Yes,
And
it's perfect. It's a
yeah,
perfect metaphor, definitely. And it's very, very
and
visual. I love that. So, because we're here on the Epic Vision Zone, Larry, I have one last question for you. If your life were an epic story, which I believe it is, what would the title be?
mm. The life and learnings of Larry Freeborg.
Perfect. Absolutely perfect. I love it. Thank you.
Yeah.
Well, Larry, thank you again for sharing your story with us today and reminding us that loss may reshape our lives, but it never takes away the one thing that defines our humanity, the power to choose our next step forward and write the next chapter. Once again, for information and to connect with Larry, go to the Epic Vision Zone bio pages where you'll find all of his contact information. And be sure to follow me on Instagram at Jane Applegath. Look me up at janeapplegath.com and like and subscribe to my YouTube channel, Epic Vision Zone. Sending you much love and gratitude. Until next time, stay visionary, lead with love, stay epic.